a very important regional event that we will be discussing internet governance, particularly internet policies that can have both economic and social impacts nationally and internationally. This year, ladies and gentlemen, Thailand has been selected for the forum's venue, and Chulalongkorn University, together with the Office of the National Broadcasting and Telecommunications, or NBTC of Thailand, feel extremely honored to co-host this event that will be taking place from the 26th to the 29th of July 2017 here at the Mahitaladhibesra building, Chulalongkorn University, Bangkok, Thailand. So those of you who just flew in, welcome to Bangkok. The APrIGF 2017, ladies and gentlemen, was established to provide everyone with the opportunity to exchange knowledge and discuss problems and directions the internet is taking us here within the Asia-Pacific region, as well as provide the venue for collaboration of different sectors related to internet governance, whether it's government, private, or the civil society sectors. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome up on stage the president of Chulalongkorn University, who is the co-host of this event, to officially welcome you all. So please welcome Professor Dr. Bandit Apon.
Good morning, everyone. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends and fellows internet users from Asia Pacific and beyond. A very warm welcome to you all for this morning. I am very pleased to have a chance to be addressing all of you at this important event, which is indeed momentous for the Asia Pacific region, as well as for all humankind in this day and age of unprecedented interconnection. It goes without saying that the internet has now become a common resource for every living being. This network of networks has made the once far-fetched metaphor, the global village, by futurist writer Marshall McLuhan, a reality. But as the internet progresses, issues surrounding its development also increase in scope and complexity, particularly those concerning public policy. Pressing issues that are of common concern to countries worldwide include right to access, cybersecurity, freedom of speech, critical network resource management, privacy, copyright, and the list goes on. With the various groups believe that the internet touches, it is daunting to expect any consensus, let alone agreement on topics that cut across ideas, values, and political standings. Forum like Internet Governance Forum or this IGF event and this regional spin-off, Asia Pacific IGF, are indeed necessary for stakeholders from all related sectors to exchange, debate, and hopefully find resolution on timely issues that affect the future development of the internet. The principle of multi-stakeholderism is critical to help facilitate an open and transparency environment that is conducive for the desirable governance of the internet. I therefore feel deeply honored that Chulalongkorn University, together with the National Broadcasting and Telecommunications Commission, or NBTC, are selected as co-hosts for this important event of Asia and the Pacific. I would like to thank all concerned parties and the generous sponsors that have contributed to make the organization of APrIGF possible. I wish the meeting a success and an enjoyable stay in Bangkok for those who travel here from afar. Thank you all for joining us. Sawasdee krap.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Bandit Apon, President of Chulalongkorn University. Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, will be representing APNIC, or APNIC as we call it, which is the Regional Internet Registry administering IP addresses for the Asia Pacific. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Director General of the Asia Pacific Network Information Center, APNIC, on stage, Mr. Paul Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here at the 7th Asia Pacific Regional IGF meeting, ensuring an inclusive and sustainable development in Asia Pacific, a regional agenda for internet governance. Very important topics for us this week. It's fantastic to have a record-setting nearly 700 people here for the 8th Asia Pacific Regional IGF, including nearly 300 from Thailand, I understand, 45 other economies represented in the audience today, and over 40% of registrants being women as well. Welcome, those are fantastic numbers. Welcome in particular to all of the younger attendees as well, the fellows, students, youth IGF participants, and those who attended the School of Internet Governance in the last few days. A special welcome to you too. In opening the event, in speaking at this opening, I would like to especially thank the Chulalongkorn University for hosting, in particular Mr. Mundut Apon, and the university itself, along with the NBTC of Thailand. Especially thank you for stepping up to host the event after the change of arrangements fairly late in the piece. Now, the Internet Governance Forum is a global movement, and this event is part of that, and it's also an honour to have representatives of the IGF here from the UN Secretariat in Geneva and from the multi-stakeholder advisory group of the IGF, and we'll be hearing from them shortly. The Asia Pacific Regional IGF has its own steering group, the multi-stakeholder steering group, and as chair I want to thank especially all those members of the MSG who contributed to this event, who worked hard in attending many teleconference meetings, in giving guidance, selecting the location and the program. It's been a lot of work and a lot of meetings over the past year. Most of all, thanks to those who made it happen, APrIGF and her team here in Bangkok, and thanks also to the APrIGF Secretariat, Yanis, Jennifer and Edmund of .Asia. These people have worked consistently for more than the last year on all of the preparations for this event to make sure that we have a successful time here in Bangkok. So we're about to start a packed 3-day program addressing all aspects of internet governance in the Asia Pacific. We've got a great array, I hope, of experts and panelists to give local and global perspectives to current topical issues in internet governance. A reminder to all of us that we try at APrIGF to capture what happens at this event in the form of an outcome document, and that's going to be developed over the next 3 days. And that's something that I urge you all to contribute to make sure that what we produce out of this meeting in the form of that outcome statement actually represents all of the discussions and all of the views that are expressed here, because that not only serves as a record of what happened here in Bangkok, but it also will serve as an input to the global IGF process itself. I think the most important thing here is for all of us to participate openly and fully, all on an equal footing with one another. We're actually all here to learn, whether we're on the stage or in the audience, and there's no great difference between speakers and those of you who are participating in the audience. So, especially for the young people and the newcomers here, I'd like to remind you of the opportunity and also the obligation to really occupy this event and to make it your own. And that goes for this week and also for the APrIGF in the future. With that, I really hope to see and hear from all of you over the next 3 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paul Wilson, Director General of the Asia Pacific Network Information Center, APNIC. And now, ladies and gentlemen, next will be the representative from Net Mission. Net Mission is the ambassadors program supported by .Asia organization to bring together young volunteers to promote digital inclusion. So I present to you Net Mission Ambassador, Ms. Gian Soriano.
Good morning, everyone. It is an honor for me to stand here today and address you all. My name is Gian, and I'm one of the organizers of the YIGF 2017. And this year also marks my third year in organizing the YIGF. And over the past 3 years, I have bear witness to the changes and development of YIGF in such a short time. One of our biggest accomplishments of this year is having the greatest number of diverse participants. Our youth fellows are from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Cambodia, China, India, Malaysia, Myanmar, Nepal, Pakistan, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, Taiwan, and Thailand. By being diverse, we hope that more and more youth initiatives can spring from different regions. In Hong Kong, where I'm from, we started the Hong Kong Youth IGF that targets high school students, and it's now its second year. Among the YIGF organizers are also Hong Kong Youth IGF alumni. In order to encourage youth from different countries, Net Mission has also prepared resources and materials, like toolkits to help youth-driven initiatives take root. Some examples include the YIGF Bangladesh, and Net Mission continues to support these initiatives. I myself started my internet journey when I was 17 as a participant. And 4 years later, I'm now an organizer, and that is because of the training and the local initiatives that I have experienced in Hong Kong. Through the YIGF, we continue to train and encourage today's young people, like myself, as the next generation of internet leaders to pass down what they have learned to others, to involve, cultivate, and give platform to engage in such dialogues that would hopefully empower them as future leaders of the internet. Net Mission creates by the principle of for youth by youth, and I think there is no better way to participate in the community. As such, some Net Mission and YIGF participants and alumni have continuously participated in the internet governance space after the past YIGF, such as being APrIGF fellows or as youth at IGF fellows, and myself being the youngest member of the APrIGF multi-stakeholder steering group. This shows our continuous dedication in shaping the youth to engage in policy discussions, host local initiatives, and participate in capacity building. So on behalf of Net Mission, I would like to thank everyone who contributed and helped motivate more young people to join these discussions and dialogues. I'm thankful and hopeful that youth voice, youth opinion, and youth participation would continue to be valuable to IGF not only this year, but also in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Soriano, Net Mission Ambassador. Our next speaker will be representing .Asia, which is the registry operator of the .Asia top-level domain and secretariat of the APrIGF. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Edmund Chung.
Good morning. And first of all, I'd like to extend my welcome to you all to this, actually this time flies, Paul. This is the 8th installment of the Asia Pacific Regional Internet Governance Forum. And would like to start by thanking all the sponsors that made this possible, especially those on the wall, but also those not on the wall, especially ICANN APAC Hub for supporting the remote participation for this event. And also a special thanks to the local hosts, as Paul has mentioned, stepping up to help us organize this event this year. The gracious venue, Chulalongkorn University, this, I understand, is the country's oldest university, and this is a very nice facility that we're in. And of course, MBTC, the media regulator of Thailand. And I'd like to especially thank the heroic effort, really, from Piranrong and Artit and the host. Please join him. So as Paul mentioned, we are closing in on 700 participants this year, and some of the highlights coming from the Secretariat is that they're coming from over 40 countries and economies, and a highlight of which is there is over 120 participants coming from the government side of the stakeholder group, which shows the growing strength of this event. This is also the first year that we have been able to support a very big fellowship program and also achieve gender balance in the fellowship program selection process. Even though we have over 160 participants, we eventually selected 50 of which, half of which is gentlemen, half as ladies, coming from 19 economies. And also this special thanks going to APNIC and Internet Society for their support to make this happen. One of the things that we're excited about is not only celebrating gender diversity, but also accessibility. Accessibility to this venue has been one of the things that we've worked on in the process, but also in terms of fellowship, we included a visually impaired person to join us, and we hope that with the accessibility, more diverse participation can happen here at the APrIGF. As Jian has mentioned, the Youth IGF program, which actually started as a side event for APrIGF, this year is now being a completely integral part of the IGF and the APrIGF. And this is also the first year that it's opening up to regional application. It used to be mainly for the local students. This is the first year we opened up, and again, special thanks for the local hosts to support that, bringing in 20 youth fellows for the YIGF program, and that also, in a total of 60 participants, we almost achieved gender balance. We have 31 gentlemen, and we're pretty much, and that's also a pretty exciting part. Another high feature I want to point out this year, which I'm excited to see, is the development of side events that are happening. Not only the prep day, the orientation day yesterday, hopefully you've enjoyed, a lot of the newcomers have enjoyed the discussions there, but also a number of side events that are happening. The cybersecurity training by GP Digital, Digital Asia Hub meeting, UNESCO and APC meeting, of course the Thai IGF that happened, Youth IGF as I mentioned, and the Asia Pacific Legislators Roundtable. So these are developments that we as the Secretariat is really excited to see happen, and it also represents a growing interest in the APrIGF. And this year is also, as the 8th installation, it is the 7th year, but is the 8th installation of the multi-stakeholder group, steering group, and this year is also marked one of the busiest years, especially with the change in the location that happened. One of the interesting things that we've observed is that perhaps it requires a little bit of crisis to bring everyone together, and I'm glad that the committees have worked very hard to make this happen. With this, I also would like to especially note the importance of from my own staff, David to support the YIGF program, and also Yanis. And please join me in a round of applause for them as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Edmund Chung, Asia Organization. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite up on stage our 5th speaker this morning, the Program and Technology Manager at the United Nations Secretariat for Internet Governance Forum. Please welcome Mr. Chengatai Masango.
Thank you very much. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the United Nations Secretariat of the Internet Governance Forum, please allow me to congratulate you for organizing the 8th IGF Asia Pacific Regional Internet Governance Forum. It is a pleasure to be with you all here today, and thank you for the invitation. For the past 8 years, the IGF Secretariat has had excellent cooperation and collaboration with the Asia Pacific Regional IGF. The main theme of this meeting, ensuring an inclusive and sustainable development in Asia Pacific, a regional agenda for internet governance, has never been more important, as the United Nations member states are committed to work hard on achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. To successfully walk this path, the General Assembly developed 17 comprehensive Sustainable Development Goals, all in order for people to build a more prosperous future for all, leaving no one behind. The innovation and technologies in the ICT arena has been recognized as a very powerful, in some cases, necessary tool for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. We are more and more dependent on computers, our mobile phones giving us access to our emails and services on the World Wide Web as they enable us to communicate, work, and learn. Having access to and knowing how to use these technologies in a safe e-environment are part of our daily concerns, with more or less intensity depending on which part of the world we are in. All this makes the existence of the Internet Governance Forum initiatives organized on a national, regional, or global level of critical importance. This unique collaborative forum works in accordance with the key principles of being bottom-up, open, transparent, inclusive, within a multi-stakeholder environment, giving all of us a chance to speak, hear from others, and exchange ideas and brainstorm for the best solutions. In the age of emerging issues related to safety in the cyber world, and accordingly, low number of population has a decent quality of access to the internet, and the privacy of end users is at stake, freedom of expression is sometimes in question, and there is a gender and digital divide. I am still optimistic that we, as a global community, are on a good path to find collaborative approaches together with all stakeholders working in their respective roles to solving these issues. This optimism also comes from the fact that there are more than 90 countries and regions worldwide that have chosen the multi-stakeholder model of the IGF to be the conduit of their communities to discuss the public policy issues pertaining to the internet. When one is aware of the extensive processes that stand behind every IGF, then the existence of more than 90 national and regional initiatives has even bigger value. The Asia Pacific Regional IGF is an example of a profoundly developed IGF process that culminates with an excellent annual meeting. This is why I would like to compliment the Asia Pacific Regional IGF Multi-Stakeholder Steering Group and the Asia Pacific Regional Secretariat for working hard to gather relevant inputs from the community, develop a substantive program accordingly, and for organizing this great meeting. Due to the complexity of the internet governance related issues, it is important for us to stay on track of the IGF processes and core organizing principles to remain bottom-up, open, transparent, and inclusive in our work. And of course, with a multi-stakeholder approach where everyone can invest their portion of expertise, the governments, civil society, private sector, and technical community. In addition, the inclusion of youth into the IGF-related processes and discussion is important as it ensures having experts for the future. I must say that the Youth Asia Pacific Regional IGF is a showcase example of successful capacity building initiative. And it's also a very inspirational entity for all of us as it brings fresh and innovative approach to the current issues. I would also like to kindly use this opportunity to invite you all to attend the upcoming 12th annual IGF meeting hosted by the government of Switzerland in Geneva from 18 to 21st of December. The main theme of this year is Shape Your Digital Future. The meeting will reflect many topical sessions as well as the vast stakeholder and regional diversity of its participants. With this, I once again thank the organizers and look forward to the fruitful discussions with all of you in the next 3 days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chengatai Masango, Program and Technology Manager at the United Nations Secretariat for Internet Governance Forum. And now, ladies and gentlemen, may I have the honor to invite up on stage the Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group member for the Internet Governance Forum and Deputy Chairman and Secretary General of China Energy Fund Committee to come up on stage. Please welcome Mr. Patrick Ho Chi Ping.
Good morning, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered at this forum to advance and develop internet governance for our beautiful region. The Asia-Pacific region is home for 4.3 billion people, or 60% of the world's population, including 1.75 billion living in extreme poverty, based on US dollars $1.51 per person per day by the Asia Development Bank. The overall internet penetration rate for the region is 43.1%, a far cry from the 83.8% in developed countries. And over a third of its 31 component countries are least developed countries with penetration rate in the 20 to 30%. If ICT can promote national economic growth and social inclusiveness, it should be widely deployed in this region. At the very same time, we should also be mindful of our privilege and conscious of the limitations of our representation. We exemplified only a minute section of our already diverse societies. Most of us are experts and professionals, versed users of information and communication technologies. We are only a minority distant from the everyday needs and exigencies of many, if not most, of our region's citizens, many of whom are still digitally illiterate. More than half of our region is still without access to the internet. 1/3 of the region lives in extreme poverty. 30% lack access to electricity. Large portions of our urban population inhabit in slums, while hundreds of millions in the rural areas are isolated from education, healthcare, and jobs. These are just some of the people not here today, whom it is our job also to serve, and from whom we shall derive our mandate. It is our duty, therefore, not only to listen to the voices that are present in this room, but also to remember and recognize those that are not. Because one day, and not before long, they will be one of us. As the Sustainable Development Goal 9C aims to promote universal and affordable ICT access in least developed countries by 2020. Indeed, in light of this context, I believe our foremost goal remains to connect the disconnected. Those are the yet non-users. Here and at home, we must continue to advocate for investment in ICT infrastructures with broadband coverages and promote education and digital literacy. We must champion the potential of the internet to serve our neediest and its ability to accelerate the eradication of all forms of poverty. We owe a parallel duty to those in our regions who do have access to the internet. Those are the users. In their regards, our tasks must be to connect them to the internet governance process. Most of the users know little more than to type, point, and click, and have only very vague notions of how the internet is regulated or governed. They do not have to worry about TCP/IP protocols, locations of ISP servers, the routing of messages, choices of backbone server connections, data stream conversion, or network packages, or the like. These are all handled for them with little transparency of rooms of choice, albeit in a field bearing high stakes in terms of privacy, security, and freedom of speech. Some pertinent issues thoroughly, such as how do approaches to internet governance differ internationally and among regions and among countries? What role do internet users have in internet governance? Who are or should be the stakeholders in internet governance, and what does each of them want? Where does the mandate come from, or who grants us the right to determine internet governance for our society as a whole? Should we discuss public interest and accountability alongside with net neutrality, data privacy, surveillance, and security? All ideas and initiatives with the aim of actualizing progress on these should be welcomed. And I hope that in our times here and beyond, we can all dedicate our energy and talents to these problems with an open heart and an open mind, which are critical to ensuring the legitimacy and success of all our work, and in achieving the sustainable development goal of promoting the use of ICT to improve the quality of life of our people in this and in every part of our world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patrick Ho Chi Ping. And now, ladies and gentlemen, next I would like to invite on stage as our seventh and last speaker for this opening session, the advisor to the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Digital Economy and Society. Please welcome Mr. Wanawit Akubut.
Sawadee krap. Good morning and very warm welcome to the first time in my home, which in fact when I work in the internet, it's always a pleasure to be in the meeting. It's a homecoming day for me everywhere I go. It's good to meet with all friends and people interested to work in the internet. You see, I came out with an empty hand. They asked about a speech with the empty hand, but we speak right from the heart, how we manage the internet. So I used to be the Government Advisory Committee of ICANN, and I'm so happy to hear that so many government participates in these internet governance forums. The roles of government, it's so important. Not to mention a lot of words that have been talking about government capture. So I used to have the joke that the only capture I have is having with the Samsung phone, and I talk capture. But in fact, government being captured now with the trade regulatory. There are a lot of regulatory that are coming out, and there are several sessions talk about this in this IGF. That is would be benefit for every government to see how could we work with the communities. I've been working in internet not very long, about 5 years, and internet is about almost 30 years in Thailand, compared to university that just celebrate the 100th anniversary. So we are just a kid, the internet. We are in the changings. You see the vibrance of the city of Bangkok, regional of 56 nations, very diverse, one of the most diverse. When I sit as a government advisory represent Asia Pacific, it's the most difficult time. Because in government, we also count 75 economy, not 56. I don't want to go into that detail because there are different views on how we divided the regions. And to find a common consensus among government, community is the one who helping us. The voice from community is important, especially the youth. So the theme have been discussed in several aspects, but I only want to mention about how we ensure the sustainabilities. Not to mention the late King philosophy of sufficient economy, that concept was in line with what SDG have been mentioned on the moderation, how we build the community to immune themselves to the impact of the change. Internet is one of the most important change that will affect the communities. How we outreach the 1 billion is in your hand to work together and share your views, your ideas, working with regulators, governments to achieve the internet.
Of the internet in Asia, please allow me to go with the important item on my agenda here, which is the official opening of the APrIGF 2017. Without further ado, I would like to invite Assistant Professor Dr. Pirongkrong Ramasud, who is the Vice President for Social Outreach and Global Engagement of Chulalongkorn University, as the organizer and host of the APrIGF 2017, to come up on stage for the official opening. All right, if all members of the media are ready with their cameras and smartphones, let's all count down together, shall we? From 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, the official launch of the APrIGF Asia Pacific Regional Internet Governance Forum 2017. Thank you very much. If you please remain on stage, and I would like to invite all the speakers who are earlier up on stage to come up on stage to join the Vice President for the group photo session, please. And also, I would like to invite, on top of the list, would be Kun Surangkana Wayupap, Executive Director of Electronics Transaction Development Agency. Dr. Prawit Lee Sthapan Wongsa, Commissioner of the NBTC Thailand, Assistant Professor Dr. Thawatchai Jit Hasanan, also Commissioner from NBTC, and Kun Bichet from Line, if you will please join as well. After this group photo session, ladies and gentlemen, may I remind you that there will be the first panel discussion where we'll be seeing up to 5 speakers on stage, plus another moderator. And after that, we'll be heading to the coffee break before we spread out to different lectures and discussions, which will take places in the rooms 202, 207, and 208, all of which beginning at 11:30 a.m. A big round of applause for all on stage, please. Oh, sorry, one more shot without the podium. A big round of applause for all on stage, please. Thank you very much. Dr. Pirongkrong Ramasud, Mr. Paul Wilson, Deanne Soriano, Edmund Chung, Chingatai. Yes, and at the end of the day, all the pictures taken today will be available on the official Facebook of the APrIGF Facebook page, I believe. All right, so now heading on to the first panel discussion, I believe. And please allow us to settle the couches and chairs and seats. No. All right. So, as I mentioned, that is time for the first panel discussion entitled Long-Standing and Emerging Issues in Development of Internet in Asia, which we will be seeing 5 speakers coming up on stage altogether. At this point, I would like to introduce to you the moderator, who will then reintroduce all 5 speakers. Please welcome the Regional Bureau Director, Asia Pacific Internet Society, Mr. Rajneesh Singh.
Sawadee Kap, and good morning to you all. Thanks to the MC for doing a great job this morning. Thanks very much. So, if you've been to the regional IGF before, this is something new that we're trying out this year. Previously what we've had is, lots of very good speeches and keynote addresses. But this year we thought we'd try and set up what's coming up in the next 3 days. So what we've got is a number of very esteemed speakers who will try and tell us a little bit about what they see will be on the agenda over the next 3 days, but as well, some of the things that you perhaps should look out for as you go into the sessions and as you listen in and, of course, interact with the various workshops and sessions we have. So if I could have all my speakers on stage, please. Anju Mangal. Anju, are you here? She is, thank you. Kuntitirat. Malvika Jairam. Not sure if Malvika is here yet. Anya Kovacs and Kunsupenya. So it appears that Malvika perhaps is not here yet. So we'll continue and hopefully she can join us a little bit later on. So the plan for this session is I'll get our panelists to share some of their thoughts on what they think are some of the sub-thematic issues we have at this event. But then what I'd also like to do is to go to the audience and see if you have any questions you'd like to ask and if you'd like to intervene from the floor as well. So we'll try and make it as interactive as we can. Of course, we have some constraints on how interactive that can be, but let's hope we can do that. Now, when Patrick was making his comments early on, we heard him say that the region is so diverse, and I think every time we talk about the Asia Pacific, that's one thing that keeps on coming out. It's a very diverse region. We have many cultures, we have many religions, and sometimes within a country there's multiple cultures and religions as well. So that, of course, all adds to this mix we have in the Asia Pacific. On you can't really boilerplate things. You can't just use a template and everything will work. You can't just copy things that are happening in other countries and replicate that wholesale, as it were. So there are 4 thematic areas that we would like to talk about today. Access, empowerment, and diversity, which Anju has very kindly agreed to speak about. We have security, particularly cybersecurity, privacy, and safer internet, which Kun Titirat will address. And Anya will cover human rights and the internet. Malvika was going to talk a little bit about the digital economy and enabling innovations, but we'll try and figure out what we can do with that in her absence. And Kunsupenya, of course, is a former commissioner with NBTC, and what I'm hoping she can do, of course, is give us a bit of government perspective on how she thinks all this issue is panning out. And particularly, of course, we have Thailand's digital economy ministry in full gear now, and the Thailand 4.0 objectives that they have. So it'd be good to hear how that what sort of learnings we have from Thailand, not just for Thailand itself and South Asia, but the region at large. So can I begin with Anju first from the Pacific, and maybe you can also talk a little bit about the Pacific Islands as well. Thank you, Anju.
Hi, thank you. My name is Anju. I was actually forced to do this, so it's not my plan. Anyway, so I represent the Pacific community. There's 22 Pacific Island countries, and the smallest country is Pitcairn, which is it has only about 49 to 56 people. So you can imagine how it is in terms of connectivity or accessibility. In terms of what I'm going to discuss is the access, diversity, and empowerment. I'd like to just talk about the development goals. Starting from the development goals, it quite clearly states Development Goal 9, which says that we need access to ICTs and access to connectivity. And going back to the SITS conference that we had, which was on the small island developing states in 2014, we basically reiterated the same thing, that we need access to ICTs and access to ICT hubs around the region. We're still finding it difficult in terms of connectivity. A lot of our rural and remote countries are still not connected. And for example, 20.4% there's internet penetration in the Pacific. And this is excluding Australia and New Zealand. So you can imagine how difficult it is for the rural communities to access the internet. But having said that, there are countries that are doing a lot in the terms of universal access and also broadband policies and also ICT policies. So for example, Tonga, they're working on a fiber optic cable, and this is great because they're not only connecting to the urban, but now they're reaching out, extending it to the other parts, remote parts of Tonga. And then we've got Vanuatu, which is already connected, but in their universal access policy, they clearly state that 90% should be connected to the internet. And I think this is something great, and it can be achieved, but by 2020, I'm not sure, but there is still hope. And then there's Fiji and there's Samoa. I think they're working on the World Bank connectivity projects. And again, I think it's all about connecting to not just the urban, but also to the rural and remote areas. So in terms of...
So let me just ask you a very quick question. So knowing that, we often refer to the Pacific Islands as the liquid continent. So if you're not aware of that, the Pacific Ocean in its entirety is 30% of the world's surface. So, if you could put all the continents into it and Greenland, you'll still have space left over to fit other pieces of land into that vast ocean. Obviously, it's small populations, small economic markets. How do you think that impacts when we start talking about policy and regulation, when we start, trying to see what's happening in, say, developed countries or other parts of the region or other parts of the world? How do you see the Pacific trying to cope and trying to replicate what's there or trying to aspire to be what else is in other countries, for example?
I'd like to acknowledge there's a lot of things happening around the world, and especially in the developed countries. I think one point that I would like to mention is that we need to learn from your experiences, the developed countries, and also apply to what we have in the less developed countries. Now, one thing that I would like to point out is that regional organizations or partners and donors, I think we need to talk about what's happening and also share what's happening in the different in the different countries. But coming back to your point, I think to your question, we're still forgotten, I have to say. I mean, Asia Pacific, I think one of the panelists mentioned that there's 40 to 50% internet penetration. And I think 20.4 in the Pacific, and I think we're still forgotten. So I speak out to I'd like to reiterate to the donors and partners and also regional organizations that we need to work together to sort of get us connected to reach 86 or point something percentage.
So if those who are not aware, next year the regional IGF will be in Vanuatu in the Pacific. So we're coming to you. Kuntitirat. Security and privacy, of course, in recent months, but not just in recent months, of course, for quite a while now, security has been a concern. But more so, we had that ransomware incident recently. There have been all sorts of things happening, which has had mass media impact. Media is taking it up, so people are far more aware of what those issues are. So how do you see that panning out? We want to be connected. We want to be hyper-connected. We have, these objectives and aspirations to connect everything everywhere. The Internet of Things is coming. So how do you see that playing out? And in particular, what would you suggest people look out for over the next couple of days in the sessions we have here in terms of some key ideas and thoughts perhaps that could be shared?
Thank you for inviting me to this panel. Actually, I see the problem of security as very closely related to the data privacy, data protection. And as we have seen in, I think, the last few years, that a lot of new rules of data protection and data security has been issued by many authorities in the world, including this region, Asia-Pacific region as well. And I think what is quite obvious for everyone is that we have so many different set of rules which create some confusions and also some uncertainty for everyone, especially the business. And as from my experience, the big business, they do not really have problem with this adaptation to the new rules, the new different set of rules that sometimes they are not really consistent with each others. The big business, they have the capacity, the resources to deal with this kind of thing, and also have access to the authorities. But what I think very problematic is the small business. The small business and those who want to enter to the industry is really confusing for them. And so I think the law of data protection and data privacy that aim to help people, that aim to help facilitate smooth business and interconnection in the region, in many ways turn out to be a barrier for many actors. The other things that I want to emphasize here is the issue of data transfer, because when we have different rules in different jurisdictions, the problem is that when we want to transfer data from one country to the others, there are so many problems. There are so many negotiations going on. You cannot just get the consent of the customers or the users and just send out the data. That something that should be as easy as possible became very, very complicated. And again, those who affect a lot are the small business, the SMEs. So, at the end, I think in this region, we don't really have dialogue or conversation about how to make a comprehensive set of rules that will encourage the free flow of data, rather than controlling or regulating what the authorities consider necessary for other aims, such as political or social aims, rather than encouraging the business opportunities and also people freedom.
So let me just pick up on something you mentioned earlier. You talked about how larger companies, it may be easier for them to adopt various frameworks. For smaller businesses, it's a bit harder. But then, of course, we have many economies in the region which are not as developed as, let's say, Thailand or Singapore or Malaysia or Australia, etc., etc. They're smaller countries. They have smaller resources in terms of policy capacity as well as technical capacity. So what happens in that case? You have, we say that the internet provides a global marketplace for everyone, that anyone anywhere can sell anything to anyone anywhere, right? But then when you start looking at some of these issues, if there's a little seller, let's say in the middle of the Pacific trying to sell something to someone in, let's say, Hong Kong, what happens then? How do they cope with all these frameworks and, things that we want to try and impose from the developed part of the region to the other part? So that's one question. The other one, perhaps, if you could expand a bit more, is the issue of cross-border data transfers, which, again, is sort of connected to my first question. That, not all countries in the region have frameworks in place. And sometimes if they do have the frameworks in place, they're not entirely compatible with each other, right? They're not harmonized, they're not synced with each other. So how do we address that issue? Is there some way forward?
Very, very difficult questions, the two. Honestly, I don't have answer for the first one. For the first one, I think it's not only about law, it's not only about policy. I think it's also about the resources of that country, the digital literacy, the education that would help build up the suitable environment for digital business, or what we call digital economy, in the less developed country. But what I think we can learn from each other is that many countries in this region have implemented many laws, data protection, data security within these 4 or 5 years, and I think we saw a lot of practice happen, and we can see that what was the good part of it and the bad parts of those legislations. And also we see that how this legislation, sometimes they do not compatible with the other part of the world, which is also another problem, because we do not only we do not want to connect only within the region, right? We want to connect with the other regions as well, and we need to accept that in terms of rules, in terms of the practice or the guideline that this region is not the region that decide or determine the way that business practice would be in the world. I mean, again, when we talk about data protection in this region, we need to look at the EU regulation. We need to look at the US business practice, because we need to do business with them. So that's what we need to accept. For the second questions about data transfer, so usually in Asia, some countries already have a rule for data transfer, such as Singapore, Malaysia. The rules establish that if the receiving country, the country that receives data do not have the equivalent law or the equivalent protection of data as the sending country, the business cannot send any data to that third country. So unless the business get consent from the users, from the customers, and also or maybe the business can make sure that their partner in the third country will follow the same data protection law or data protection standards. So that's what happened. And we also have this rule in EU as well. So what's happened is that those countries who do not have the data protection law are left out in this situation. And the business need to struggle to get the same standard as the other country, not only with their own legislation, which again, such a big burden for many businesses.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn to Anya now, and what I'm hoping she'll cover a little bit is, human rights and the internet. I think over the last several years now, and perhaps in the last couple of years in particular, I think the human rights issues have really come to the fore in these various forums that we're doing, which I think is a good thing. Of course, but there are many dimensions to the human rights issue when we start talking about human rights and the internet. One of the speakers mentioned earlier the gender issues, of course. There's accessibility issues. There's, more recent things like hate speech and so on. So could you offer some thoughts on where you see that heading? And you've done a lot of work on this, of course, over the years. So perhaps some comments on what people should be looking out for over the next few days, but as well some of your perspectives on how things are shaping up.
Thanks, Raj. I think you're right that there are many, many issues, and I'm not going to try and be exhaustive for that reason either. What I really want to do is rather draw attention to the context that we are in at the moment. I think what does unite us, not just in Asia Pacific, but in the world, is a global context where human rights are increasingly under threat, where there is more and more support for exclusionary ideologies, sometimes on the part of governments as well, in many countries definitely on the part of population. I think it has created massive new challenges for the defense and promotion of human rights that also has an impact on internet governance. There may be 3 points I want to make around this. The first is there is an issue with how this affects people offline, which I do always hope we will bring back into fora like these as well. We've seen, for example, in South Asia, from Pakistan to the Maldives, activists continue to be killed because they express themselves using the internet. When we speak about the empowering potential of the internet in venues like these, I think we really need to keep these people on the agenda as well. Because this wasn't a case of online censorship. I think sometimes those issues get kind of sidelined in one particular session, but really what we do across all sessions, whatever touches promotion of human rights, touches the space these people have to speak. And people do continue to be killed. I think that's definitely in South Asia a very big issue. The second point I wanted to mention, I think Malavika will also speak more about privacy. You've also spoken about data protection. I won't go into detail about that, but I do think that these issues around privacy, security, are very important. We see more and more that, for example, countries use national ID systems, often in the names of either development or security, but without having strong privacy protections in place. And I think in Asia Pacific, we really need to ask ourselves, what does that mean then for our vision of both development and security? If you see that in Europe, whatever the shortcomings are, there is a much stronger push towards greater privacy protections, are we actually creating two rungs of people? One set of people who do see the right to privacy protected as a fundamental right, and the rest of the world that doesn't. And what's that going to mean for our futures then? Not just for the right to privacy, because again, since human rights are interconnected, I think they have overall impact. And my third point is around the issue of gender. Gender and sexuality both. There are some very strong sessions around that issue on the program here. If you want to dig a little deeper, a group of feminists are organizing a feminist pop-up on the 31st of July, so that gives you a chance to go deeper. But again, I think it's really important to highlight the intersectionality of these issues. So we sometimes think, well, there is a session on gender on the agenda, so if you're interested in that, go there. But really, if you look, for example, at an issue like surveillance, both research that we have at the Internet Democracy Project have done and others like the Digital Rights Foundation in Pakistan shows that women are fundamentally differently impacted by surveillance than men are. This is not just a session that should be addressed in a session on gender. This is an issue that should be addressed in any session around security, surveillance, etc., including sessions that look at more technical aspects of these, because use is different, the impact will be different. I also think it's really important that we think very deeply about the solutions we propose to some of the gender challenges. To use the example of online abuse against women, which is something we definitely want to see addressed. But what you see, for example, in India is that often the solutions that are proposed are of a very protectionist nature, seeing online safety as an end in itself rather than a goal to empowerment. And in the context of India, which has one of the largest gender digital gaps in the world, that actually feeds into arguments to keep women away from the internet. So even though we're saying we're doing this in the name of women's rights, we're actually undermining women's rights in other ways. We also see that it's increasingly being used as an argument to promote censorship across the board, to limit intermediary or to increase intermediary liability, for example. So again, I really think we should be very careful not to look at these issues as something that we can address in a session on gender. It needs to be there throughout. And one final point I wanted to make is about the question of, so then who should address this? I think if we look at this global context, many people in this room, I think, know that I've always been a very staunch defender of multi-stakeholderism, but I'm also conscious of the fact that it's civil society that is often the most dogged defender of human rights, and dogged in terms of how it puts human rights on the agenda. If there is such a pushback against human rights, what does that mean? Can we really count on a multi-stakeholder model to continue to promote and protect human rights? And what is it then that all stakeholders should do? I would really like us to have that conversation in the meeting. How are we going to push back against this global context where human rights are under threat?
Thanks. So, just picking up on one of your points about gender. So, I really think gender should be mainstream in the discussions. We've last year we were involved in a session on that elsewhere. But I don't think it should be a bolt-on. It should not be an afterthought, as you said. There's a gender session, so we're done. You can go and attend that if you so wish. But really, we need to mainstream it in the discussions. It should not be. It should be part and parcel of everything, and not just gender, I would say, but also other minority groups. We say that the internet provides equal opportunities for all. Then it should also be for all segments of community as well. One very quick question. Recently, we've been doing a little bit of thinking around the social implications of the internet. Now, we often in these sort of venues, we talk a lot about the positives of the internet and how it's changed and transformed people in their lives. but sometimes we don't pay enough attention to the larger social implications. Some of them, of course, you've already mentioned. So I'm just wondering, where do you see that sort of discussion heading, and how much should those discussions, the social implications of the internet, should be a part of fora such as these?
What do you mean by social implications?
Let's say the bad things on the internet.
Okay. I think we need to continue to keep the good things in mind first and foremost. There are though ways in which, so maybe to come back to the problem of online abuse, because I think that's a good example, right? So a lot of people will say, well, anonymity is the cause of all of this, so we should do away with anonymity. Well, if you actually look at research from the US shows that accounts that were identified, the abuse that was done by them was qualitatively worse than accounts that were anonymous. So those arguments often don't get support in practice anyways. Beyond that though, sorry. Damn.
It's okay. We can come back to that later if you so wish. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. But so just to sort of recap that, I really think we should think a little bit harder about some of the social implications of the internet, and again mainstream those discussions, because as kids are literally born digital these days, they will face greater, their challenges will be quite different to all of us here on the panel or in the room perhaps. Malavika, if I could turn to you, you've heard our other panelists talk about various things related to the thematic sessions. So if I could get you to talk a little bit about the digital economy and where that's headed, because that's where, of course, everything seems to be converging on. We want to go digital, everything, everywhere. Of course, one of the things that is quite necessary, and we've said the internet has, it's allowed innovation to breed, if you like, its creativity. The open internet, of course, has played a big role in that, as well as the multi-stakeholder model that Anya mentioned as well, which has allowed the internet to grow and flourish across the world. We do know that that development is not equitable across all countries, but people are working on those issues, right? So perhaps some thoughts from you on where you see the digital economy heading, particularly from the context knowing that there's so many digital gaps between countries and economies in this region. And how do you see that playing out? And again, is there anything people should be looking out for over the next few days in the sessions we have around that topic?
I think one of my favorite quotes in this space comes from science fiction, as do a lot of our technologies today, from William Gibson, when he said, "The future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed." And I think that is so true of everything, that we are sort of planning for something that may happen in the future, except they're already here. Artificial intelligence is here. It's not something that's going to come into a product near us. It's in our phones. It's in our search engines. It's in everything that we already do. So I think this idea that it's something that we need to prepare for in the future, we're already behind, right? We're already playing catch up. And I think the best way to put it is sort of, we have this gap between technology 4.0 and policy 1.0. I think that's a very sort of simple way to think about just how big that gap is. So I think that's something we really need to focus on. I think accompanying that, there is this huge fetishization at the government level about making everything digital, right? And I think for all the reasons Anya and others have mentioned, you can't make everything digital as a sort of, technology enabling, driver when not everyone is online. I think right now we already have issues where some people have more access than others. There's a huge digital divide. There are issues of literacy. There are pockets of people affected and impacted differently. But I think when you're forcing everything to become an online delivery of services, of interaction with government, but not everybody is online, I think that's even worse than the situation we're in where people have unequal access. Because in a situation where you don't have this, everything is going to be digital, people still have alternate ways to access and interact with government. But when you push everything onto an online platform, you're basically saying, if you're not online, you don't count, right? And that's why I'm a little disturbed by the rhetoric that we use when we talk about the SDGs, when we talk about, let no one be left behind. Well, actually, they are left behind. But if your government is proceeding at a different pace than efforts to actually bring people online, this gap that I talked about is going to get even worse. And it's actually going to affect the most marginalized even worse than we currently have. So I think in this sort of, race to actually innovate, we're going to leave behind more people, and the people who actually need the internet more than everyone else, because they have no other way of showing that they exist. They have no way of interacting with the government because their voice doesn't really count. They don't have any power. And I think everything we're talking about here is essentially about power dynamics and how asymmetrical that is. At the same time, I think one of the other things we need to worry about is, because a lot of governments who want to innovate in this space, who want to sort of do all the right things for the right reasons, they don't have the inbuilt capacity within government to be technically savvy, right? So what do? They sort of say, oh my God, we want to do X, we don't know how to get there because we're bureaucrats, we're civil service, people. We don't actually know how this whole artificial intelligence thing works. What do? They turn to the private sector to help them. And in some ways, that sort of public-private partnership and that nexus can be wonderfully enabling and empowering, but you have to ask questions about the terms on which that's done, because for two reasons. One, I think, you've got huge privacy implications when a private company has access to citizens' data at a level that is unprecedented. And they're using it for personal reasons, for marketing reasons, for all kinds of other things that we sort of expect government wouldn't do, right? We have this sort of naive assumption that government will use it for the purposes we ask it to. We know from the NSA and other things that doesn't work that way. But with the private company, we know for sure that's going to happen. And I think the problem is, one, issues of sort of geographic and national boundaries when that happens, because if you think your data under, say, an ID project is going to stay within your own country, you might sort of have some level of apprehension about it. But if you think it's going to be handled and pulled in and referenced with all kinds of other data held by an international company, you might feel very differently about participating in that ID program, thinking, wait, I don't know how it's going to be used. And I think the second reason why this matters is a lot of the protections that we have against government, constitutional rights that we have for free speech, for equality, for rights of assembly, for rights not to be discriminated against, those apply only against government. So, particular constitutional rights, you can exercise them and you can sue the government. You don't have exactly that same set of rights against a private company. So I think as increasingly governments are digitizing things and they're using private companies to, as proxies for themselves, you need to think about that nexus. There are wonderfully successful examples where, people from industry being embedded within government has proved wonderfully transformational. And, the OECD is doing a great Going Digital program looking at how digital transformation adopts a whole of government approach and is actually not as top-down as other programs, and you actually build in grassroots interests. There are ways that it can be done really well, but I think we need to also look at the failures and see what can we learn from where the public-private nexus has gone wrong. I think the other thing that's a really great opportunity is we tend to think, and I'm a lawyer, so I'm as guilty of this as anyone, we tend to think of the law as something that has a constraining function. We think law holds people back. We think law says you can't do this, you can't do that. But what about if we thought of law as actually enabling innovation? We've seen that in a lot of countries, governments that come up with very forward-looking legal policies actually end up kickstarting innovation. If you have really sensible tax laws, if you have sensible things around how service tax works, or around how easy it is for a company to incorporate, you can actually use the law as a way to get competitive advantage and actually say, oh, look, we're a company that helps you incorporate with a single window clearance in 2 days, versus a country that needs 97 permits and going through 100 levels of bureaucracies before you can even just set up a company. And you might be a small Mickey Mouse operator who has a really cool idea, but if the system is against you, even just to sort of get into this space, all this rhetoric of saying, oh, we're going to create Silicon Valley in Singapore or Silicon Valley in Myanmar is never going to take off, because the barriers to entering a space that has, and again, it's going to be unequally distributed, because big companies with more money, with more resources, with bigger legal teams are always going to win. The little guy with the cool idea will never get anywhere. So I think we need to do that, and I think we need to recognize that Silicon Valley is...
Thank you very much for... I would like to beg from you only 10 seconds. Could you please close your eye? Just think what a dark this world is. Just think I am the person not seeing anything. How I am surviving in these dark situations. Just open your eye and give a clap for me. Do you know why I ask you to give a clap? Do you think I am very handsome, that's why you give a clap? Not really. I want to know how many people are here. This is the accessibility we are talking about. I'm just representing 1 billion people in the globe who are people with disabilities, who have a legal rights. There is a human rights treaty that's called UNCRPD. Many of our region countries in economics ratified that human rights treaty, and they have Article 9 and 21 who have ensured equal access of internet. How you can ensure equal access of internet? That's you require a good internet governance. Without ensuring good internet, inclusive internet governance, it is nearly impossible to achieve SDG goals. The main theme of the SDG goals is no one left behind. So please consider disability is a part of diversity, and don't ignore 64 million people who are living in Asia-Pacific region who have some kind of disabilities. I will see you by my ear. I will see you by touching. I will see you by getting your mail. I will see you by accessing internet. I will read you online. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Bhaskarji. And really, when we say that we want to build an inclusive agenda, I think it's very important that we include all communities. I can take one question from the audience. If someone, you are the first with your hand up, so please, can someone hand him a mic, and then Anya, I'll come back to you, and then we can wrap up here. Mike, please. And if you could be quick with your question.
Okay, I will be very quick because we are in youth, and that's my question is related to access and empowerment. Because of the role, Economic Forum saying, within 2020, there will be 5 million jobs would be lost. But there is as 60% of the Asian Pacific peoples who don't have the internet access. What would be the concern in the 2020 after, for the peoples who are going to be joining the job market? Because no one's talking about what would be the world for the young peoples who are going to be joining the job market who even don't have the access into the internet. So I don't know, if you guys can talk about Raj and Malika, if you guys can focus related with the access and empowerment. Thank you.
Okay, so Anya, you want to answer? Your previous comments, and then.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back to my earlier comment. I made a comment about anonymity being a double-edged sword, but I guess building on that, if we look at the so-called bad tendencies on the internet, I think there are always two sides to that story, right? And why I'm worried often about the attempts at solutions that are made are because often only one side of that story is recognized. So when you look, for example, at cybersecurity, governments are constantly telling us that we need to give up privacy in the name of cybersecurity, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, though, many governments actually make us more insecure on the internet because, for example, they hang on to backdoors, try to exploit them, do not allow companies to inform users in time about those backdoors. So I think there's a clear duplicity at play. And you see something similar with all the comments about fake news. Very worrying. At the same time, though, there are plenty of governments that are actually paying people to make certain statements on the internet without those being identified. So I think often on these trends, we need to dig deeper. We also need to start thinking more out of the box for solutions. For example, on this trend of paying people to make statements, if we say that advertisements in a newspaper need to be clearly distinguished from editorial content, why can't we say that paid statements always have to be identified as such? For example, I think also, for example, with online abuse again, there are other solutions we can find than only looking at censorship. Why not start thinking about what it means to build online communities where actually people in the middle ground feel much safer to speak up, where extremes are not rewarded so much? Because the way the platforms function now, something like Twitter, for example, rewards the extremism because of the way it's set up. So what are alternative ways of building communities? I think we need to start thinking much more of those kind of approaches, away from just saying, let's shut it down.
Okay, thanks, Anya. So Anju has volunteered to try and answer that question. So after she quickly does that, what I will ask my panelists very quickly to do, imagine if you had to tweet your closing comments. So 140 characters, please. So after Anju, if you could please quickly go through that, and then we can close it.
I'm not sure if I understood your question, but like the youth population is, in terms of the percentage, I think it's about 60% or something for the Asia Pacific. I'm not sure, don't quote me, please. But most of them are living in rural and remote areas, and they're focusing a lot on the agriculture sector, on subsistence economy. So, like I said earlier, to bring them back to the 2020 plan in terms of connecting them is going to be a really big challenge. It's a mammoth task. But having said that, I think it's important to raise that we need to work together to get this youth population connected in the rural, remote areas. But I also like to say that there are also persons with disabilities, especially young people that are not able to connect to simple applications like JAWS for the persons who cannot see. So I think it's not just about looking at the 2020 plan, but also looking at capacity building approaches, how to look at training opportunities for the rural, remote sectors. But before we get there, we need to actually connect them. So that's one of the key concerns. And we do have, like, for example, agriculture sector. A lot of the youths are working in the agriculture sector, but we are looking at e-agriculture as one of the solutions, and we are doing that in the Pacific. So one of the good example is taking these applications like market information systems to the rural, remote areas, registering farmers, 31,000 or plus farmers to the MIS database, and then trying to get them to access, for example, to domestic market, taking the produce to the market. And I think this is one of the steps that we are looking at. But again, it's quite huge. We're looking at e-agriculture strategies in Vanuatu, Fiji, and PNG. And we're looking at maybe future collaboration with ITU, World Bank, etc., to look at how we can connect these youths in the rural, remote areas, but also focusing on the urban, because there's still some people that are not connected because of the issue of affordability. And yeah, that's it.
So if I could have your tweets, please, your closing comments.
Okay, so from what I have heard the other panelists talk about today, one of the most important things is that there are many competing values within the context of internet governance. Sometimes security goes against privacy, sometimes privacy goes against some other public morals. So I think the first thing that we need to do there is trying to make everything go together as long as it can go. We don't need to choose between security or privacy. We can have both. And I think technology will help us to have both. So that should be the first step. And if it is really impossible to have both, and we need to choose between only one values, the way that it should be is that we should let the people choose. we should not let someone to tell us that, okay, we choose security over privacy. This is the way that we have chosen, follow us. We should not let anyone to do that. So the choosing, the process of choosing what would be the prioritized value should be in hand of people in the democratic way.
I've just been told that we need to get off the stage, so please, very quick comments.
A tweet promoting and protecting human rights. Looking forward to 3 days of working with all of you to continue to do that.
First of all, my Twitter account is @Supinya. And the hashtag will be digital citizenship and with 9 elements: access, communication, commerce, literacy, etiquette, law, right and responsibility, health and wellness, and security.
Good tweet storms. Mine is, I think users are not targets or objects of development, they're equal participants.
Okay, my last one is believe in the multi-stakeholder process, like what our panelists said this morning. And also, this is your event, so make it your event. And we're looking forward to talking to you more.
Okay, thank you very much to my panelists. And please stay engaged, and we look forward to interacting over the next few days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all 5 ladies, Ms. Malavika Jayaram, Ms. Anja Kovacs, Ms. Thitirat Thip Samrit Kun, Ms. Supinya Klangrong, and Ms. Anju Mangal. And of course, a big round of applause for our moderator, Mr. Rajnesh Singh, please. All right, I'm going to try to keep this under 140 characters, but it's likely impossible. So, first up, I'd like to take this opportunity once again to thank all of you for participating in this opening ceremony. And I'd like to thank our key sponsors, which are AIS, True, 3BB, Google, Siam Commercial Bank, and the Bank of Ayutthaya. And for the next 3 days, we will have the opportunity to exchange knowledge and ideas. I sincerely hope that the APrIGF 2017 will surely help you gain new understandings and make new friends and develop a sustainable network that can become an integral part of our regional internet sector. And in addition, ladies and gentlemen, our organizing team would like to inform you that we would like to have you join the coffee break, which is set up outside. All the food and drinks are halal, so don't worry about that. And also reminding you that the different lectures and discussions will take place in the rooms 202, 207, and 208, all of which will begin at 11:30 on dot. Hope to see you again next time. Until then, sawadee krap.